My name is Christopher Mowers. I am the Zoho team lead at AspenTech CRM in Novi, Michigan. We are a Zoho advanced partner, and we specialize in helping you simplify your business using primarily the Zoho suite of business applications. Today, we are going to talk about Zoho Flow and to talk a little bit about how you can use it and to demonstrate for you a little bit about how you can use it, what it's really good for. One of the great things about Zoho Flow, one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of the tool is because it puts automation in the hands of business users and allows more and more people to directly engage with their Zoho system or with their cloud-based or even on-premise, as we'll see, information systems to automate, to unify, to make seamless. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit of a taste of that today. And so, as I said, Zoho Flow's purpose here is to be essentially a middle layer. And so lots of businesses, most businesses, I would say, have a particular cloud tool for this aspect and a particular cloud tool for another part of their business. And maybe they have an on-premise tool for another part of their business. So maybe you're managing support tickets in a tool like Zoho Desk or in Zendesk or something like that. Maybe you're communicating with Zoho Click or with Slack or with Teams or one of these other chat and video audio tools. Maybe you are hosting your website on WordPress. I'm going to show you a WordPress example a little bit later. Accounting, web forms, mailing, all these different things that you do in your business. Now, if you've been a Zoho user and if you're primarily using Zoho to run your business, you're probably in a little bit better position than a lot of businesses because at least your tools are in the same suite for the most part. But one of the really great things about Zoho Flow is whether your tools are in the Zoho suite or whether your tools are outside of the Zoho suite, there's a really good chance that Flow is going to be able to help you build consistent processes that give you time back, that reduce manual entry, that reduce error due to human input, and allow you to design a process and watch it happen. And the best part, again, for business users here, is that very often this can be done without a single line of code. That was the tagline for this webinar, right? Without a line of code. And the examples I'm going to show you today, with really one exception, are done in a codeless fashion. You can teach any process-minded person in your organization to do this. And so let's dive into it, and I will show you how it works. First, we're going to do a simple example. And that simple example is that I have a Zoho form on my website, and I want to be notified in Slack when someone fills it out. That's simple. Two tools, unrelated tools, right? Now, I'm going to use Zoho Form as an example, but if you have Gravity Forms or many, Form Stack, many of the other form tools, those will work. I'll show you that here right now. So if I open up Zoho Flow, I'm going to create a new flow, and I just want to show you what we're looking at here. I'm just going to call this example 1 for the moment. So when you think about process design, you think about triggers and actions. And so something has to kick this off. And you can see that Zoho basically gives you 6 options here. Used to be only 3, but they've been developing the product and adding more features. And so now there are 6. And so app-based is what we're going to do today. That's something like when I create a new lead in Zoho CRM, or someone fills out a new form, or something like that. The app serves as the trigger. There is Scheduled based, which is exactly what it sounds like, some sort of recurrence. Webhook provides a URL that you can call. So that's a little bit more technical, and that may or may not make sense to you, but webhooks are designed to plug into lots of applications that you use. So if there is an application that Zoho Flow doesn't support directly, there's also a chance you may be able to use webhook. URL is polling a URL for new data. Email is now you can email into Zoho Flow, send an email, almost like CRM email parser or something like that, where you can send an email in. And then RSS or Atom, these are feed protocols that like podcasts, for example, are posted typically in RSS or certain like news feeds, things like that. Google Alerts, for example, you can get an RSS of. And so that's just another structure that you can pull with some frequency and pull something down and do something with it. So the examples we're going to do today are all app-based, but know that you've got lots of options to kick this thing off. Just going to select configure here. And I told you I'm going to use Zoho Flow, and so that's what I will do. Or sorry, Zoho Forms. I can search. I'll give you a sense of the breadth here, though, before we select it. So the Zoho Flow website, I'll show you in a moment. It says 900 plus applications. And you can see here as I scroll, these are all the applications that have triggering that is pre-integrated with Zoho Flow. So there are lots of here that are quite popular. There are lots here that certainly I've never heard of, and probably none of you have either. But that's one of the really nice things about this product, is that you've got pretty much, I don't want to say any cloud tool, but there are so many here that I think there's a good chance, if you've got some sort of a cloud tool, that there's some sort of an integration with Zoho Flow. I'm not going to keep scrolling. You get the idea. Also important to mention is, I'm sure many of you are on the Zoho suite already, that Zoho itself has great triggers for Zoho Flow, as you might imagine. Many apps that you would want to integrate already have triggers and actions. All right, so I am already connected to Zoho Forms. This is a process that you would go through of authenticating with any of these apps. We're not going to demo that, but that's something that you would do. I'm choosing my form. And you can see now when an entry is submitted, this flow is going to kick off. And so really engineering this process, this simple example, is really straightforward. I'm just going to find Slack in here, and you can, again, these are all these actions. You can see just the hundreds and hundreds of different apps that have actions that you can take. And so I'm just going to find Slack. And I am going to simply post on a channel that is in my organization. So I'm going to find set public channel. And the name of that channel is Contact Us Submissions. And this is a templating process. Now we're going to put a message in here. And again, completely codeless. So I might say something like, pulling the fields from the form here. I'll show you the form in a minute, so this will become clear. But I might say like the person's name, and then in maybe parentheses, I would say their email address. Says, and then there's a line like, I need help or something like that, which is, how can we help you today? These are the form fields. Again, I'll show you the form momentarily. And then we want to give their broader message here. Let us know what is on your mind. And that is the extent of it. If I just wanted to have a form submission post to Slack, that's it. I'm done. No code, a little bit of templating, not a big deal. And so let me show you this in action. This is a website. This is a WordPress website that I have for the purpose of this demo. And so it's really simple and it's kind of incomplete, but this is, you might imagine this WordPress website running on a private server. If I go contact us, I have this Zoho form here. And so these are those fields I was referring to. Let's just say CM test 1. What is your email? I'll use an email. And this is what I was talking about. They've got like, I need help. I love your product. I would like to submit a guest post. I'm going to go with, I need help. And then no matter what I do, I can't get this to turn on or something, right? Some support type message. Submit it. The form is submitted. If I go here to Slack, just came in, here it is. CM test 1, the email. This was that template that I wrote. I need help. No matter what I do, I can't get this to turn on. Really simple example, obviously, like very, very simple. But I just wanted you to see how natural this is. If I go back to Zoho Flow and just show you in the history now, we'll see this record that is completed. And you see an input from the form, output from the form. This is that data. And then input to Slack, output to Slack. This is handling all of these. If you've ever had developers write API calls for you, this is doing all that. It just, you don't have to do it. Or you don't have to have a developer do it. You can just drag and drop. Okay, let's make this a little bit more complex. I showed you on the form. In fact, I will start to fill this out so you can see. Let's do a new one here. Let's say CM test 2. Okay, so we've got these are three kind of categories, right? There's I need help, which is sort of a support thing. There's I love your product, which is soliciting a testimonial. And then there's I would like to submit a guest blog post. We'll deal with the blog post in a little bit because that's going to be a little bit different. But I want to differentiate between these two because I need help as a support request, and really going into Slack is great, but it's not sufficient. I also have Zendesk, or maybe I have Zoho Desk or something like that. And I want to go into my ticketing system. I'm going to use Zendesk in this example because I was trying for sure to show you a mix of Zoho tools and non-Zoho tools. Of course, in practice, we use Zoho Desk and we recommend Zoho Desk. So running through what we're up to here. Let's do it this way. Let's have the user fill out the form. Let's have that form trigger Zoho Flow. Let's notify Slack in both cases, right? Because either way, we want to know that something came in. But then let's check what was submitted here. And then if it's a support request, let's send it to Zendesk. Finally, what would be really nice is once it has been created in Zendesk, let's send another Slack message with a link to that ticket, right, directly. So you could go right from Slack to the ticket. So let's build that. And we can start with the one that we already have up. And so I want this to happen in either case. I want to post on Slack in either case. But then I need some logic here, right? To say if it's this, do this. If it's this, do this. And so in addition to all of these apps that we have here, Zoho Flow also has some built-in tools for control flow and other things. Let me just show you these real quick. You can set variables so that if at a certain point in the process, something's going to happen that you want to reference many times, you can set that variable to make it easier throughout. You can set delays, which is really nice. If part of your process involves sort of kind of waiting for something to happen and you want to make sure that there's adequate time for that to happen before things continue, you can do that. What we're going to use here in just a moment is a decision structure. And that will look familiar to a lot of you. I also, while we're in this menu, I want to show you under notifications that we can send emails. Always a nice feature, right? To be able to send an email. And we'll talk about custom functions a little bit later too, and some of these other options. So let's bring in the decision. And basically you're branching the path here according to different factors that you might want to branch the path. In this case, we're going to branch it depending on whether it is support a support request or not. And so how would we know that? We would know it's a support request because the field, how can we help you today, will be equal to I need help. That was how we set it. And notice on the right-hand side here, you start to see these parameters stack, right? So I'm not going to need anything from Slack to do this, but if I did, I could grab it, right? And as you go farther in the flow, you'll have more and more of these parameters on the right-hand side. We're going to use actually the Zendesk one here in a moment. So I set this up. This is my condition. And then I like to label these. So I'm going to say is support or something like that, just to make it clear. And then decision, let's say, what kind of message or something like that, right? You can just very quickly overlay these so you know what's going on. The default case here, as it's explained, signifies that none of these criteria are met. You can see I can stack many different conditions here if I want. I'm not going to do that right now. I'll just have the one. It's either support or it's going to be something else, and I'll handle that differently. And so we wanted to send this to Zendesk, and then we wanted to post again to click. And so let's figure that out. Let's go into our apps, find Zendesk, and we will create a ticket. Notice too, as I sort of hold this in place, that you're able to handle errors. And you can handle errors by sending emails or doing all kinds of other things. We're not going to do that here today in this webinar, but notice that it does exist. All right, so let's create a ticket. And we'll say the subject of that ticket is going to be, we're going to keep this really simple. We'll say the subject of that ticket is website support request. And then in the ticket description, let's do a little bit of templating. So let's just give the name. We can do it like this: name, email, find the email, and let's say request, and I'm going to do a new line for that one. And let us know what was on your mind was the name of that field. And so this will create a ticket with this in the body. Just really simple. There are a lot more options here in terms of assignment, priority, things like that. Not going to touch on that right now. Okay, so the ticket will create, and we wanted to also post to Slack again after the ticket had been created to let people know. And so let's find Slack again. Now, could you do that in a single step with Slack? Of course, but I just wanted to show you how to chain this up. So public message, we'll do it on contact us again, and let's just say we'll do it this way. We will say ticket created in Zendesk. And the URL for this, and this is going to depend on like your ticketing system and things like that. But in this case, for mine, for Zendesk, for the demo, is this base URL, and then we grab the ticket ID. And so that ticket ID comes back from Zendesk. This is the idea, right? That you sent something to Zendesk, and now it's going to come back, and it's going to have additional information. And so in this case, the ticket ID we will use to form the URL that takes us to Zendesk. And so I hit done. Now, let's look at the impact of this. First of all, let me apply my changes. So going back to our website here. Let's do the testimonial first. Say, I love your product. This is the greatest workflow product I've ever used, or something to that effect. submit it. And if we go into contact us submissions, here it is. That's the same as last time. That's not really a difference. But if now we use this to submit a support request, I might say test 3. And let's say I need help. It's broken. Please use help. If I submit that, you'll see it come into Slack here. Sometimes these get queued up a little bit. Probably just because I submitted it. Yeah, okay, so here we go. That happened in 2 steps. This posted, I need help, everything is broken, please help. But then a few seconds later, this posted. And so we have ticket created in Zendesk, and here's that URL. I click that URL. You see website support request, and this was that template that I wrote, right? Name, email, request, everything is broken, please help. Now you can map up some of these fields and things like that. I didn't do that because I wanted to keep this relatively simple. But you can see how you can start to chain these things together and build actually quite complex processes that really help you and your team. This use case of posting to something like Slack or Click is one that in particular we find very helpful because people are usually in these applications a lot. You can have separate channels for separate things, and you can drive connection to other applications via things like URLs. Okay. Now, everything I've showed you so far is cloud-based. And for years, that's all we had in Zoho Flow. And I think most of us by now, most of our applications are cloud-based. And so this tool works really well. But I know, and you know, that there are many organizations out there that have some component of their information systems on servers that they own, or maybe in a rented server in a data center, or maybe on something like AWS or something like that, where it's not plugged into this network of public APIs. And so integration becomes much more challenging. And especially with security in mind, integration can be very challenging. But Zoho Flow now has an answer to that problem. And if I go here to Logic, and I click down here, we have these, and we can do it. This is designed to execute on the machine that it's running on itself. This is designed to use some sort of a network. For some of you, this may mean you may follow this perfectly. Some of you may not know what all this means. Stick with me here for just a moment, if that's the case. Bash scripts, PowerShell scripts, Python, VB, etc., are all ways of executing some functionality on a machine that you own. And that could mean a server. That could mean literally someone's desktop computer. It could mean anything in between. And so what Zoho Flow has now given us is the ability to install software on that machine that plugs it into Zoho Flow, and then allows you to kick off functionality from Zoho Flow. So unlike the other ones, this does require some IT support, some IT experience. When I say without a line of code, this one may require some script, but it's typically script that would be done by the people who are maintaining these systems for you anyway. This is not really software development per se. It's more like scripting and server kind of stuff. And so I built a particular example of this that I wanted to show you because I wanted to show you how this works. I think it's really great. But if you've got legacy systems, this is something really to think about in terms of bringing those in to work with Zoho. And the good news is once these things are set up, then it's just as easy as anything else in Zoho Flow to maintain it and to extend it and things of that nature. So I am going to show you one that I built. I'm not going to build this one live for you. I'm just going to talk through it. Let me turn this off. All right. So I mentioned, let me go back to my website here. I mentioned that this fake business that I have here, we have a blog. And you can see I've got a couple of blog posts here. But I want to start soliciting guest blog posts. And maybe I'm shortcutting a few steps for the sake of the demo, but what I would really like is for people to be able to submit a blog post. And I would like that to become a draft post in WordPress. Now, WordPress is something, if you're not familiar, that is locally hosted on a server. It's not a cloud product per se. I mean, you can put it on the public cloud on a server, but it is really a server-oriented product. And so executing something locally on that server is a reasonable way of getting something into the system. And so all of this is cloud-based except for the very last step that I want that post in my WordPress here. And so let me show you how that might work. If I go back to my slides, we're going to do this in the following way. We're going to connect Zoho Flow to the WordPress site, and it's going to interact with something running locally on our WordPress server. And we're going to use remote actions to do that. Let's have a look. So this will look fairly familiar. I modified it a little bit from what we were doing before. We've got a couple different decisions in here. We have our new form submitted. Right away, I'm going to determine if it's a blog or not, because the blog is going to follow a different path. If it's not a blog, I'm doing what I was doing before. I'm posting to that Contact Us channel in Slack. And then if it's a support request, I'm also creating the ticket and sending that ticket to Slack as well. And so that is essentially the same as what we had before. This is new, and this is this execute bash script. Now, you don't need to know what a bash script is to see what this does. This is connected to my server that I've called in here WP2. And I have a script on that server called make post. It takes a title and content, and it uses the WordPress's local command line interface to convert that into a draft post. So that's for an IT professional to work out that side of it. But once they've built that, you can integrate with it in a codeless way right here. From there, we're also going to notify in Slack, but we're going to do it in a different channel. We're going to do it in this other channel called guest blog posts. So let's step through this. First, let's do another support request so I can show you that that is functioning in this one. If I were to go to contact us, our support request. We submit. Here in contact submissions, we can expect this to list. Here it is. And you see it comes in two phases. Comes in, this is a support request, and then ticket created in Zendesk. But let's do. I would like to submit a guest blog post. What is the title of my post? I have one here that I'm going to paste in. All right, sending in a lot of text here. And submit. Now let's see what happens. So I have this other channel here, guest blog posts. And here it came in. A new guest blog post has been submitted by CM Test 5 and is in draft status. And here's the body of that post. So you can imagine if some people were in this. Okay, that's interesting. If I go now to WordPress, and here's the back end of WordPress. If I refresh that, here is a new post. If I go to edit, this is going to need formatting. It's going to need images. It's going to need certainly consent to post and all that. I didn't build in things like that, but you get the idea. WordPress here is not integrated via a public API. That is possible to do if you integrate WordPress with WordPress's public services, but this one is not. This is just running on a server completely isolated from the world. I accomplished this by sending it to my server and running that bash script. And here it is in draft. I mean, I would really need to clean this up, but just for the sake of demonstration, I can hit publish right now. And if I go back to my website, need an image, but here it is. That was all it took, and now it's here in WordPress. And so, what does that look like from Zoho Flow? Look at our history. This is the last one here. You can see the form came in. Here was the data from the form. We evaluated and determined, since the dropdown was I would like to submit a guest blog post, that it was in fact a blog. This bash script was executed. You can see what was sent to it, and you can see what the server threw back. And so you could do things with this too if you wanted to. I mean, you could certainly see whether success was true or not and send notifications accordingly. You can see that it wrote to a post with this ID. And then finally, here we are in Slack. So what does that mean for you if you have any kind of legacy systems? Well, it means not only connections to tools like WordPress, it means potentially connections to databases. It could be connections to, if you have any kind of local processes that need to kick off, things like on the Windows stack, things that are written in C# or VB, or if you're on the Linux stack, if you have processes that kick off on your servers. If you have any kind of other tool that is self-hosted that you can affect by running any of these, I mean, even Python for that matter, which can do all sorts of things. You're able to kick it off here, integrate with it here, make changes to the process here. You just need kind of one time someone to set this up for you if that's not your area of expertise. The other thing worth mentioning while we're here is this custom functions, and this is not new, unlike commands and scripts. Custom functions are a way that we can bring in Deluge. Deluge is Zoho's proprietary language, and it is meant primarily to accomplish Zoho things. But we have used Deluge many times to integrate with other services that are not directly supported in Zoho Flow. And so, yes, the title of this webinar was Without One Line of Code. And I want you, really the key takeaway is how much can be done without a single line of code. But I also want you to know that with a little bit of code, you can go 10 times farther too. So if there's something that is not quite possible in the codeless fashion, just little bits of Deluge can really get you the rest of the way there a lot of times. And so let's talk about how AspenTech can help you with Zoho Flow. I started at the beginning by sharing with you that Zoho Flow puts automation tools in the hands of business users. And that's absolutely true. And something that I know we at AspenTech feel very strongly about, something I feel very strongly about personally, is breaking down walls that separate business users from control over the tools that they use to run their businesses. But that doesn't mean that professional consultants like us can't help take you farther. And so we provide consulting services on Zoho Flow. We can, help you design good processes. We can build these for you too, of course, and we're happy to do that. Don't feel like you need to. If it's something that you don't want to take on yourself, we absolutely can take it on too. We can let you know, kind of what works, what doesn't work, best practices, get you in the right direction. As I mentioned, we provide development services, so we can build those custom functions. We can help you if you need remote tools to execute. As you saw, I set everything in this demo, I set up myself. So we have those skills definitely. And we can also help in your other Zoho applications to make a process run from start to finish. Finally, we provide training services, and we can teach you, this was just a simple webinar giving you an overview of what this tool can do. We can give you much more in-depth training on every little field if you want, or on, how to ultimately learn this and do it yourself. We can provide that training. Or we can help you design a process, we can build it for you, and we can train you and your team on how it works and how it should be used. We can do that too. We can fit into your organization and your process here in whichever way works best for you. So if you're looking for someone to take on most of the work, we can do that. If you're looking for someone just to give a little push where you need it, fill out your team a little bit with some additional skills, we can do that too. We've got our website on the slide here. You're free to reach out to us there at aspentech.com. We have a contact us form. But in the meantime, I'm curious if anyone has any questions about Zoho Flow. Feel free to post in the chat, or I'm happy to unmute you too if you would rather speak. While you're thinking, I've got a couple here that a couple answers I can share with you. Did have a question about multi-step workflows or workflows that involve looping. Like, so instead of, the example I showed you was someone submits a form, and then based on that one form submission, stuff happens. But what if, we had an invoice, and maybe for each line in that invoice, we needed to do something? That is possible to handle. It can be handled depending on how the data is coming in. There are a couple different ways to do it, but you can, if it's coming in via webhook, you can loop. If the structure is such, you can sort of say for each invoice line, do this. You could also handle it by calling another Zoho Flow via webhook. So you might have some list of invoice lines or something like that, and you might say, let's call a particular Zoho Flow for each one of these invoice lines. There are ways of doing that. That gets a little bit trickier, but definitely ways of doing it. Another question I have here is around scalability. People that process thousands or tens of thousands of records, does Zoho Flow scale up? And the answer is yes, but it's important to understand how it scales up. And so Zoho Flow will scale as far as you want it to, but the way that you pay for Zoho Flow is by credits. And those credits are determined based on the number of transitions in your flow. So it can be a little bit complicated to calculate, but basically the more steps in your flow, the more that's going to cost you to run. And so if your rate of processing is very, very high, I'm talking, you know, like hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of records, something like that. Certainly, it could be more cost effective to build the automation another way using some sort of a development platform, some sort of place where you can execute code, because your investment in the development you'll get it back in terms of that being much cheaper to run. But I would not let that scare you off, because Zoho Flow is so easy to implement. And because it does scale, and because the credits are relatively inexpensive, it can be good even for heavy processes. You just have to understand the trade-off of, you know, going codeless and paying for that versus paying for someone to build something for you and then it being less expensive to run. And we can help you work that out too. And we do that all the time, where we can say, okay, if we build it in Flow, it'll scale like this. If we build this on another development platform, like in your CRM directly or on something like Zoho Catalyst, it'll scale like that. And we can help with that comparison. More question I've got here. Question about, can we create custom connections with APIs that are not in Zoho Flow's built-in integrations? And the answer is typically yes. Typically yes. That does require code a lot of times. So we can go about it one of two ways. Like I mentioned, a lot of other platforms that might not be directly integrated support webhooks. And so especially if it's a matter of triggering, but even sometimes in the case of an action, we can use webhooks to bring that application into the Flow process. The other thing we can do is we can use Deluge. One of the things Deluge is used for all the time is for making API calls. And so that's something that if you just have one step in your process that requires an integration that's not in Zoho Flow, that can be accomplished many times in one of those two ways. Also, like we said, if it's something that is running on a server that you own or a server that you rent or something like that, we can now take these remote options to execute commands, scripts, things of that nature, which really, really opens up the possibilities compared to where we were, you know, even a year ago. Any other questions here? Well, I want to thank you very much for attending today. You'll receive a follow-up from me, I'd say within the next 2 business days or so, with a link to this recording, and just with some other follow-up information. So you can watch for that. Really appreciate your time. aspentech.com if you want to get a hold of us. If you've got any other questions or follow-up, happy to take those. Yeah, have a great day, everyone.